A single mom looking for a job to support her daughter went on an interview with a wealthy man. Weeks later, she discovered something about her boss that nearly cost her her life. Delaney, a single mom struggling to make ends meet for her daughter Willow, woke up every day with a heavy heart. Willow's father had abandoned them, leaving a gaping hole in their lives. Money was tight, and every penny was carefully counted to feed Willow and cover the basic necessities. Every morning, Delaney dropped Willow off at the local daycare center and set out on her search for a new job. She had spent weeks in a frantic hunt, answering ads, attending interviews, but nothing seemed to pan out. The lack of experience and the need to care for her daughter were obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Yet, Delaney refused to give up. She carried an unwavering inner strength, fueled by her unconditional love for Willow. One day, an opportunity arose. An interview with Jasper Thorne, a business tycoon who owned one of the most successful companies in the country. The invitation filled her with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The imposing and luxurious facilities of the company contrasted sharply with the humble reality of her life. As she waited in the reception area, Delaney smoothed out her dress, trying to tame the few rebellious strands of her hair. Uncertainty washed over her, but she forced herself to maintain a firm posture and smile, conveying confidence and professionalism. Finally, Delaney was called in for the interview. Jasper Thorne, towering in his impeccably tailored suit, looked at her with a penetrating gaze, his amber eyes conveying a mixture of severity and interest. Delaney felt intimidated by his presence, but she took a deep breath and introduced herself, talking about her passion for learning and her unwavering work ethic. Jasper, although acknowledging Delaney's lack of experience, sensed something special in her. "I must admit, you don't fit the profile I typically look for in my employees," he said, with a slight, enigmatic smile. "But there's something about you, an inner strength that intrigues me. I can't ignore it." Jasper's words ignited a spark of hope in Delaney's heart. He offered her the position of personal assistant. Delaney could hardly believe it. Things were finally starting to look up for her and Willow. But as she left the company, a sense of uneasiness settled over her. There was a deep sadness in Jasper's eyes, a sadness she couldn't explain. A feeling that he hid secrets behind the facade of success and confidence. Her first day of work arrived quickly. Delaney found herself facing the imposing structure of the company, once again nervous, but also eager to start a new chapter in her life. Jasper welcomed her into his office and explained her responsibilities. The task was challenging, requiring organization, proactivity, and the ability to handle the demands of a high-powered businessman. Delaney was determined to do her best. Days turned into weeks. Delaney adapted to her new role, learning the nuances of Jasper's work style and striving to anticipate his needs. However, the feeling that he was hiding something continued to haunt her. He often seemed distant and preoccupied, lost in thoughts he didn't share. While organizing documents in Jasper's office, Delaney found an old photograph hidden in a drawer. The picture showed Jasper smiling next to a beautiful woman, with a striking air of familiarity. Delaney found herself captivated by the photo. Who was this woman? Why was Jasper keeping her hidden? Upon seeing Delaney with the photograph, Jasper's expression instantly changed. He snatched it from her hands with a brusque movement, tucking it into his pocket. "You shouldn't be going through my personal belongings," he said, his voice cold. Delaney apologized, but the feeling that she had discovered something significant overwhelmed her. The expression of suffering and longing she had seen in Jasper's eyes when he looked at the photograph was undeniable. From that day forward, Delaney began to observe Jasper more closely, searching for clues that might unravel the mystery of the woman in the photo. She started asking discreet questions to other employees, but no one seemed to know anything about Jasper's past. Until one day, one of the oldest secretaries told her a story that sent chills down her spine. Years ago, Jasper was about to get married, the secretary said, her voice low, almost whispering. But his fiancée, a young artist named Clementine, disappeared without a trace days before the wedding. Jasper was devastated and never quite recovered. Delaney gasped. The woman in the photo was Clementine. What had happened to her? Why had she disappeared so suddenly? A wave of compassion and curiosity washed over Delaney. She felt a need to help Jasper find peace and answers. With this new information, Delaney found herself at a crossroads. She knew she had to be discreet, as Jasper clearly didn't want to talk about his past. But her curiosity and growing concern for her boss propelled her forward. In her spare time, Delaney began to research Clementine. She discovered that Clementine was a talented artist with a bright future. Her paintings were known for their emotional vibrancy and ability to capture the essence of their subjects. Clementine also came from a wealthy family, but she had decided to forge her own path, rejecting a life of luxury and privilege to pursue her passion for art. It was at one of her exhibitions that she had met Jasper. As Delaney delved deeper into Clementine's life, she felt a strange connection to her, as if the two women were bound by an invisible thread. Both were strong and independent, women who had fought for what they wanted in their lives. One day, while searching online, Delaney found an article about Clementine's disappearance. The article mentioned that the police had investigated the case, but they had never found any clues as to her whereabouts. Family and friends described Clementine as a happy and vibrant person, someone who would never have disappeared willingly. This only fueled Delaney's suspicions that something more sinister had happened. She began to wonder if someone could have harmed Clementine, or if she was running away from something or someone. Meanwhile, Delaney also noticed a gradual shift in her relationship with Jasper. As they spent more time together, he started to open up to her more, entrusting Delaney with more important tasks and seeking her opinion on business decisions. Delaney felt flattered by his trust, but she also felt increasingly confused. She wanted to help Jasper, but she knew he was hiding secrets about his past. One day, while working late at the company, Jasper finally mentioned Clementine's name. It was a brief mention, but Delaney could see the pain in his eyes as he uttered the name. Do you miss her?" Delaney asked gently. Jasper sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Clementine she was everything to me. When she disappeared, it was like a part of me died with her, he confessed, his voice hoarse. Delaney placed a comforting hand on Jasper's. I'm so sorry, she said. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for you." Jasper looked at Delaney, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that Delaney had never seen before. Thank you, Delaney, he said, his voice low. For everything." Delaney smiled, feeling a sudden closeness to her boss. I'll always be here for you, she promised. And if you want to talk about Clementine, or about anything, I'll be here to listen." Jasper nodded, and for a moment, Delaney thought he might open up to her. But then, the moment passed, and Jasper reverted to his usual reserved self. We have to get back to work, he said, averting his gaze. But as they returned to their business matters, Delaney couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. Jasper had shown her a glimpse of his true self, and Delaney was more determined than ever to help him find the answers he needed. As the weeks went by, Delaney and Jasper continued to work together, in ever closer collaboration. Jasper's work ethic and dedication impressed her, and she couldn't help but feel drawn to his intensity and passion. However, despite the growing connection, Jasper kept Delaney at a distance when it came to his personal life. He rarely spoke about his past or Clementine, and Delaney began to wonder if he would ever fully trust her. Everything changed on a business trip to New York. Jasper asked Delaney to accompany him. She was excited about the opportunity to see the city and learn more about Jasper's business world, but she was also nervous about spending so much time alone with him. During the flight, Jasper was strangely quiet and thoughtful. Delaney tried to start a conversation, but he seemed lost in thought. It wasn't until they arrived at the hotel in New York that it finally opened. Clementine and I were going to come here for our honeymoon, he said suddenly, looking out the window at the city skyline. We had everything planned down to the last detail. Delaney held her breath, surprised that Jasper was sharing something so personal with her. It must have been very difficult for you to come here without her, she said gently. Jasper nodded, eyes still staring into the distance. Clementine she was unlike anyone else I'd ever met, he said. She was passionate, brave, and had such a big heart. When I was with her, I felt like I could do anything. Delaney listened intently as Jasper continued talking, sharing stories about his time with Clementine and the plans they had made for their future together. As he spoke, Delaney could see how much Jasper had loved Clementine and how much pain he still felt over her loss. I've spent every day since she disappeared looking for her, Jasper said, finally turning to look at Delaney. I hired private detectives, I followed every lead, but it's like she disappeared off the face of the earth. Delaney could see the tears in Jasper's eyes, and her heart broke for him. Impulsively, she reached out and took his hand, squeezing it lightly. I'm sorry, Jasper, she said. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to live with this uncertainty. Jasper squeezed Delaney's hand in response, and for a moment they stayed like that, finding solace in each other's presence. Finally, Jasper cleared his throat and let go of Delaney's hand, returning to his usual, composed self. Thanks for listening, Delaney, he said. I haven't talked about Clementine in a long time, and, well, it means a lot to have someone to share it with. Delaney smiled, feeling a new closeness to Jasper. I will always be here for you, she said. And if there's anything I can do to help you find answers, I will. Jasper nodded, a look of gratitude in his eyes. Actually, there is something, he said. Of those detectives I mentioned, I think they might be close to a breakthrough, but they need access to some of Clementine's old files, things I've kept all these years. Delaney could see how much it cost Jasper to even consider revealing these precious memories. If you want me to help you review these files, I will, she offered. We can do this together. Jasper hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Thanks, Delaney, he said. I think it's time for me to finally face the past and find out what really happened to Clementine. As they prepared for the task, Delaney felt a new purpose and determination fill her heart. Back at the office, Delaney and Jasper began working on Clementine's files. There were boxes and boxes of old documents, photographs and sketches, all meticulously saved by Jasper for years. As they scrolled through Clementine's memories, Delaney couldn't help but feel moved by the depth of love Jasper had for her. Every photograph, every scribbled note, spoke of a connection that transcended time and distance. But as they delved deeper into the files, Delaney began to notice some discrepancies. There were periods of time in Clementine's life that seemed to be completely undocumented, and references to people and places that Delaney didn't recognize. When she mentioned these inconsistencies to Jasper, he looked at her with an expression of uneasiness. I always knew Clementine had secrets of her own, he admitted. But I thought we shared everything with each other. Delaney could see how much the idea that Clementine might have kept things from him disturbed Jasper. Impulsively, she reached out and covered his hand with hers. I'm sure she had her reasons, she said, gently. And whatever they were, they don't change how you felt about her, or how she felt about you. Jasper looked at Delaney, really looked at her, and something seemed to change in his expression. For a moment, Delaney thought he might lean in and kiss her. But then, the moment passed, and Jasper looked away, turning back to the files. As they continued the investigation, Delaney couldn't help but feel her own feelings for Jasper growing in intensity. Her passion and vulnerability drew her like a magnet. But she knew that Jasper was still deeply in love with Clementine and didn't want to get in her way. One day, while going through a stack of old sketches, Delaney came across something that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was a drawing of a woman who looked remarkably like her. Same build, same expressive eyes. With shaking hands, Delaney showed the sketch to Jasper. He examined it with an expression of astonishment and confusion. I don't understand, he said. Why would Clementine draw someone who looks so much like you? Delaney shook her head, equally disconcerted. But as she looked at the drawing, she couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. It was almost as if she was looking at her own reflection. As they continued to look through the files, they found more and more similar drawings. Always the same woman, always bearing a striking resemblance to Delaney. It was as if Clementine was obsessed with this mysterious figure, drawing it over and over again. Jasper seemed increasingly disturbed by the drawings, and Delaney could see that he was beginning to question everything he thought he knew about Clementine. What if I never really met her? He asked one day, his voice hoarse. What if everything we lived was a lie? Delaney hugged Jasper tightly as he cried. She knew she didn't have all the answers, but she couldn't bear to see Jasper suffer. We'll get to the bottom of this, she promised, gently stroking his back. Together, as they stood embracing each other in the office, surrounded by memories of the past, Delaney felt a new determination fill his heart. She didn't know where this mystery would lead them, but she knew she wouldn't rest until Jasper had the peace she so deserved. As Delaney and Jasper tried to examine Clementine's drawings, Delaney began to feel as if she was being watched. It was an unsettling feeling, as if someone was following her every move, waiting for the right moment to attack. At first, Delaney dismissed these feelings as a product of his overactive imagination. After all, she was under a lot of stress lately, both from her work with Jasper and her growing attraction to him. But as the days passed, the feeling of being watched intensified. One day, while walking home from the office, Delaney couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. She looked over her shoulder several times, but the streets were full of people and she couldn't make out any familiar faces in the crowd. Just when she was about to enter her apartment building, a man suddenly appeared in front of her, blocking her path. He was tall and thin, with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. Delaney Caldwell, right? The man asked, his voice low and threatening. Delaney took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. Who are you? She demanded. What do you want? The man smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. I want you to stop sticking your nose into matters that don't concern you, he said. You and your boss, Jasper Thorne, have been asking questions about things that should remain buried. Delaney felt a chill run down her spine. How did this man know about her investigation with Jasper? And what did he mean by things that should remain buried? I don't know what you're talking about, Delaney said, trying to keep her voice steady. Jasper and I are simply trying to find out what happened to your fiancée, Clementine. We're not trying to cause trouble. The man laughed then, a harsh, unpleasant sound. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Clementine Rivers wasn't who you think she was, and there are people, powerful people, who will do whatever it takes to make sure their secrets stay hidden. Before Delaney could respond, the man approached her, grabbing her arm in a firm grip. Consider this a warning, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. Stay away from this matter, or you will suffer the consequences. With that, he let go of her arm and disappeared into the crowd, as quickly as he had appeared. Delaney stood there, shaking, her mind racing. Who was that man? What did he know about Clementine that was so important to keep secret? The next morning, Delaney went straight to Jasper's office and told him about the meeting. Jasper listened to her with a frown, his expression growing darker and darker. This confirms my suspicions, he said finally. I always suspected there was more to Clementine's disappearance than met the eye, but I never imagined it could be connected to something so sinister. Delaney nodded, her mind still reeling with the implications. What do we do now? She asked. If what that man said is true, then we are getting ourselves into something dangerous. Jasper was silent for a long moment, staring into the distance. Finally, he turned to Delaney, a new determination burning in his eyes. We cannot back down now, he said. Not when we're so close to the truth. Whatever happens, we have to see this through. Delaney felt her heart fill with equal parts wonder and fear. She knew Jasper was right, that they couldn't go back now, but she also knew that the path forward would be dangerous, perhaps even fatal. However, as she looked into Jasper's eyes, she knew that she would follow that man to the ends of the earth if he asked her to. Because, somewhere in the midst of all this mystery and intrigue, she had fallen in love with him, completely. And now, with the threat of an unknown danger lurking in the shadows, that love would be put to the test like never before. But Delaney was up for the challenge, because she knew that no matter what happened, they would face the future together, determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. Delaney and Jasper threw themselves into their investigation with renewed energy. They spent long hours in the office, reviewing every clue, every document, every drawing, searching for anything that might shed light on Clementine's disappearance and the secrets she had left behind. As they worked, Delaney couldn't help but notice the change in Jasper. There was a new intensity about him, a determination that bordered on obsession. It was as if the threat of the mysterious man had awakened something primal and powerful within him, a need to protect and defend what was his. And Delaney knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that somehow she had become part of it. The way Jasper looked at her now, with a mixture of admiration and desire, told her that his feelings for her went beyond simple physical attraction. There was a connection between them that could not be broken. Finally, after weeks of relentless investigation, they had a breakthrough. Hidden in one of Clementine's old sketchbooks, they found a scribbled address, along with a date and time. It was from just before Clementine's disappearance, and Delaney and Jasper knew instinctively that it could be the key to unlocking the entire mystery. They decided to follow the track together, despite the risks. When they arrived at the address, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, they found the place deserted. But as they made their way through the maze of dusty rooms and dark corridors, they began to notice signs of a recent presence. Footprints in the dust, cigarette butts, even a torn piece of fabric that could have come from a woman's clothing. And then, in a back room, they found a makeshift shrine dedicated to Clementine. There were photos of her covering the walls, some taken in secret, others clearly posed. There were wilted flowers and consumed candles, and at the center of it all, a makeshift altar with a painting of Clementine in the center. Jasper stared at the painting, his face a mask of anguish and anger. Who did this? He demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. Who was so obsessed with Clementine that they built a shrine to her? But before Delaney could respond, they heard a noise coming from the front of the warehouse, footsteps and the murmur of voices. Exchanging an alarmed look, Delaney and Jasper hurried for cover, crouching behind dusty boxes. Just as two men entered the room, Delaney caught her breath. Her heart hammered in her chest. She recognized one of the men as the same one who had threatened her on the street. But the other. Jasper stood panting beside her, and Delaney knew he recognized him too, because there, standing in the center of Clementine's sanctuary, was none other than Jasper's father, a man he hadn't seen before. Years ago. I knew you would come here sooner or later, Jasper. Jasper's father said, his voice cold and hard. I knew you couldn't leave the past behind. Jasper took a step forward, hands clenched at his sides. What did you do, Dad? He demanded. What happened to Clementine? Jasper's father smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. Clementine discovered things she shouldn't have, he said. Things about our family, about our business. We couldn't allow those secrets to come out, so we took charge of her. Delaney felt the blood run cold in her veins. She looked at Jasper and saw the devastation and betrayal etched into every line of his face. His own father, the man who was supposed to love and protect him, had been responsible for the disappearance of the woman he loved. In that moment, Delaney knew, with a sudden and terrible clarity, that they could trust no one. They were alone in this, just the two of them against the world. And if they wanted to survive, if they wanted to get justice for Clementine, they would have to fight for it with everything they had. The revelation of Jasper's father's involvement in Clementine's disappearance shook Jasper to the core. Delaney could see the internal struggle reflected on his face. The disbelief, the betrayal, the overwhelming pain of knowing that his own father was capable of such cruelty. But there was no time to process, not with Jasper's father and his henchmen right in front of them. Delaney knew they had to act fast, or everything they had worked for, all the secrets they had discovered, would be for nothing. With a quick gesture, Delaney grabbed Jasper's hand and pulled him toward the door. "Run," she whispered. And together, they ran out the door. They could hear shouts behind them, the sound of footsteps in pursuit. Delaney's heart pounded in her chest as they ran through the dark streets, weaving and turning in an attempt to lose their pursuers. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they found themselves at a dead end, gasping for air and desperate. Delaney looked around frantically, looking for a way out, but there was none. They were trapped. Just when despair began to take over, Jasper grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to look into his eyes. Delaney," he said, his voice fierce with determination. "And no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you and I won't let anything happen to you." Delaney felt her eyes fill with tears. Even amidst the chaos, she whispered, "I love you too, and we're in this together until the end." They hugged then, clinging to each other like a lifeline in the midst of a raging storm. And it was at that moment, in each other's arms, that Delaney had a sudden memory. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out Clementine's old sketchbooks, which they had brought with them. With trembling fingers, she flipped through the pages, desperately searching for something, anything that could help them. And then, just when she was about to give up, she saw him. A sketch at the end of the notebook, half hidden by ink stains. It was a detailed plan of what appeared to be a warehouse complex, with a clearly marked escape route. Clementine had left a map. The only way for them to get out of this mess. There was no time for doubts. Grabbing Jasper's hand, Delaney dragged him down the alley, following the map as best she could. They turned left, then right, then left again. The sound of their pursuers grew closer with each step. Just when Delaney thought his lungs might explode from the effort, they arrived at a small door hidden at the base of one of the warehouses. With shaking hands, they opened it and rushed inside, closing and locking the door behind them. They found themselves in a dark, damp tunnel, the air thick with the smell of mold and decay. But it was an escape. As they hurried through the darkness, following the faint ray of light at the end of the tunnel, Delaney felt a glimmer of hope bloom in her chest. They followed the bright sunlight, blinking and disoriented. They were on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by fields and open sky. And there, parked on the side of the road, was a car waiting, with the keys in the ignition. Delaney and Jasper exchanged a look of pure disbelief. Could this be another one of Clementine's plans? There was no way to know for sure. But as they rushed toward the car and sped away, Delaney knew one thing with absolute certainty. Clementine had somehow saved them. Before she died, she had found a way to protect Jasper and show him the truth. And Delaney knew that she would spend the rest of her life trying to be worthy of that sacrifice, loving Jasper with the same fierceness that Clementine clearly felt. They drove for hours, putting as much distance between themselves and the city as they could. They had no clear destination in mind, just the urgent need to escape, to find a safe place where they could catch their breath and plan their next move. Finally, as the sun began to set over the horizon, Jasper stopped the car at a small motel on the side of the road. They were hundreds of miles from home, in a part of the country where no one knew them. It was the perfect hiding place, at least for now. As they settled into their room, Delaney couldn't help but notice how tired and worn out Jasper looked. The day's events had clearly taken a toll on him. His father's betrayal added to the fresh pain of losing Clementine. But even in the midst of her anguish, there was a new resolve in him, a sense of purpose that Delaney had never seen before. It was as if facing the truth about her father had finally given him the strength he needed to move forward, to seek justice for Clementine, no matter the cost. Sitting together on the edge of the bed, Jasper finally opened Clementine's sketchbook, which he had brought with him. They leafed through it in silence, marveling at her skill and beauty of drawings. But when they reached the last page, they were both breathless, because there, scrawled on the back of the cover, was a message. A message from Clementine, written in her elegant handwriting. My dear Jasper, the message said. If you are reading this, then I fear the worst has happened. I always knew your father was a dangerous man, who would do anything to protect his secrets. And now it seems his secrets have finally caught up with me. Delaney felt her eyes filling with tears as she continued reading. Clementine's voice almost echoed his words. But even now, even in the face of my own end, I only think of you, of the love we shared, of the life we dreamed of together. And I know, with every fiber of my being, that we were destined to find each other. That's why that I leave you this notebook, Jasper, because in these pages I hid the truth. The truth about your father, about your business and your secrets. The truth that can finally set you free. May I help you bring this truth to light. And when you do, when you are finally free from your father's grip, live, Jasper. Live the life we always wanted. You. Because our love, our true and eternal love, knows no limits. Forever yours, Clementine. When Delaney finished reading, they were both openly crying. But even in the midst of their pain, they felt a new sense of hope and purpose fill their hearts. Clementine was right. As long as they had each other, they would never be alone. And with the truth finally within their grasp, they knew nothing could stop them. Taking Jasper's hand in his, Delaney looked him in the eyes. His voice was firm, with determination. "And we'll make it, Jasper," she promised. "For Clementine, for us, we will find a way." The next morning, Delaney and Jasper put their plan into action. They knew they couldn't do it alone, that they would need help to expose Jasper's father's crimes and see justice served. Their first stop was the office of an old friend of Jasper's, an investigative journalist named Bartholomew, who had been investigating the shady activities of the Thorne family for years. When Delaney and Jasper showed him Clementine's notebook and told him her story, Bartholomew was astonished. This is huge," he said, flipping through the pages with growing enthusiasm. "With this evidence, we can finally build a solid case against your father, Jasper. We can finally make him pay for his crimes." Jasper nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "Whatever it takes," he said. "I owe it to Clementine, I owe it to myself, to make sure the truth comes out." Over the next few weeks, Delaney, Jasper and Bartholomew worked tirelessly to build their case. They spoke to sources, gathered documents, and gradually pieced together a picture of corruption and deceit that spanned decades. But even as they worked, Delaney couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that every move they made was being monitored. More than once, she caught flashes of familiar faces in the crowd, men who worked for Jasper's father. She knew they were in danger, that every day she passed brought with it the risk of being exposed. But Delaney refused to be intimidated, refused to back down, even in the face of threats and danger. Because she knew this was bigger than her, bigger than even her love for Jasper. This was about justice, about truth, about responsibility, about ensuring that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, was above the law. Finally, after months of hard work and sleepless nights, they were ready to present their case. Jasper walked into the police station with his head held high, Clementine's diary clutched to his chest. And when he told his story, when he presented the evidence they had gathered, the detectives' faces went from skeptical to surprised and horrified. With this information, said the chief of detectives, shaking his head in astonishment, we will have no choice but to investigate. If what you say is true, Jasper, your father will go to prison for a long, long time. Delaney felt a wave of emotion course through her body upon hearing those words. After all this time, After everything they had been through, finally, there was finally hope for justice. But just as they were turning to leave, just as Delaney began to allow herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had accomplished the impossible, the door to the police station suddenly opened, and Jasper's father walked in, his face red with anger. How dare you, he yelled, pointing an accusing finger at Jasper. How dare you betray me like this, to tarnish our family's name with your lies? Jasper faced his father, his voice shaking with emotion. It's not lies, Dad. It's the truth. The truth is what you've tried to bury all these years, but I can't be part of your deceptions anymore. I can't live with this darkness any longer. For a long moment, father and son stared at each other. Then, slowly, Jasper's father reached into his coat and pulled out a gun. He said, his voice low and deadly, "You are not my son." What happened next was a blur. Delaney saw Jasper's father's finger squeeze the trigger as if in slow motion. She saw Jasper throw himself in front of her in a desperate attempt to protect her. Then chaos ensued. Screams. The sound of gunshots. Jasper's body falling to the ground. In the days that followed, as Jasper clung to life in the hospital and his father was arrested and charged with his crimes, Delaney barely left her side. She held her hand in his, whispered words of love and encouragement, prayed with every fiber of her being for his recovery. And miraculously, day by day, Jasper began to improve. The bullet, luckily, did not hit any vital organs, and with time and medical care, they were confident he would make a full recovery. When he was finally released from the hospital and could hold Delaney in his arms and kiss her like there was no tomorrow, Jasper knew that everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, had been worth it. Because he was finally free. Free from his father's control, free from the secrets and lies that had haunted his life for so long. And with Delaney by his side, he had everything he ever wanted, true love and the opportunity for a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, as Jasper's father's trial dominated the news and the truth about his crimes came to light, Delaney and Jasper began to build their life together. It was in a peaceful ceremony in the garden, surrounded by the scent of flowers and the glow of the sun, that they exchanged vows and promised to love and care for each other forever. And when it was all over, when Jasper's father was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, and his assets were confiscated and redistributed to his victims, Delaney and Jasper knew they could finally put the past behind them. Now, finally, they can look forward to a life full of hope and possibility. If you liked this video, tell me in the comments if you would have the courage of Delaney to put her life at risk in search of the truth. Stay now for the next video.